She signed a marriage contract to pay her father's debt, but the CEO's one rule changed everything. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to today's main character. The gray afternoon sky hung heavy over downtown Chicago, the kind of sky that pressed on your chest and made the whole city feel colder than it was. Maya Thompson ran up the marble steps of Hale Corporation, her breath coming out in short white clouds. Her father's hospital bills were due in 48 hours. The bank had already called twice that morning. Inside the lobby, everything gleamed steel, glass, and silence. Her shoes squeaked faintly against the polished floor as she approached the reception desk, clutching a thin folder to her chest. Her hands trembled, not from the chill, but from fear. "Mr. Hale will see you now," the assistant said, voice flat, eyes avoiding sympathy. Maya followed the woman down a corridor lined with glass walls that reflected her anxious face back at her. At the end of the hall, a pair of dark oak doors opened into a room too big for one man. Adrian Hale sat behind a massive desk, a figure carved in stillness, his tailored suit the color of midnight. He did not stand when she entered. His voice was cool, detached. "Miss Thompson, you requested to discuss your father's debt?" "Yes," she managed to say, barely above a whisper. "Please, I just need more time. He is in the hospital and I—" He cut her off gently but firmly. "Time is a luxury that interest does not understand." Maya swallowed, her throat dry. "I will do anything." Adrian leaned back, studying her. The light from the window traced sharp lines across his face. "Anything?" She nodded. He opened a folder and slid a single document across the table. "Then sign this." Her eyes darted over the page. It was not a payment plan. It was a marriage contract, a legal agreement binding her to him for 6 months. Her heart stopped. This is not real." "Oh, it is very real," he said calmly. "You marry me. Your father's debt disappears. In 6 months, we part ways, clean and simple." Her fingers trembled over the pen. "Why me?" Adrian's lips curved, not quite a smile. "Because you have nothing to gain and everything to lose. That makes you honest." The silence stretched. The rain began tapping softly against the tall windows. She looked down at the blank line waiting for her signature, the ink trembling at the tip of the pen. Then she saw it one sentence in bold. "Rule number 1, no love, no emotion, no attachment." Her breath hitched. "No love?" she repeated softly. Adrian's gaze stayed steady, unreadable. "It keeps things simple." A flash of her father's pale face in the hospital bed broke through her hesitation. She pressed the pen down and signed. The sound of the nib scratching the paper filled the quiet room. Adrian reached out, turning the page toward himself, his movements precise, almost mechanical. "Welcome to your new life, Mrs. Hale," he said. The title hit her like cold water. She forced a breath, her pulse loud in her ears. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Inside, her world had just changed forever. She did not know it yet. But the man across the table, the one who had sworn to never love, had just written the first line of the only contract he would never be able to control, the one with his own heart. The rain had not stopped when Maya left Hale Tower that evening. The city lights blurred through the wet windshield of the taxi, each color bleeding into the next like watercolor on glass. She pressed her forehead against the cold window, her fingers still trembling from the signature that had changed her life only hours earlier. The driver glanced at her through the mirror. "You okay, miss?" She forced a small nod. "Yes, just a long day." But it was not just a day. It was a lifetime compressed into a single decision. By the time the taxi stopped in front of the small apartment complex on the south side, the rain had turned into a steady drizzle. The stairs creaked under her weight as she climbed to the second floor, where the peeling numbers on the door read 2B. Inside, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant and medicine. Her father's oxygen machine hummed in the corner, rhythmic and fragile. "Dad," she whispered, setting her bag down beside his bed. "I talked to Mr. Hale today." "Okay." Her father opened his eyes slowly. His skin looked pale against the pillow, the tubes resting beneath his nose like thin threads keeping him tethered to life. "Did he—" Give us more time? Maya forced a smile she did not feel. Something like that. She brushed a hand over his hair, still thick but streaked with gray. You do not need to worry anymore. I handled it. He sighed in relief, closing his eyes again. You have always been stronger than me. She swallowed hard, the lie pressing heavy in her chest. There was no way she could tell him that she had just married the man who owned their debt, a man she barely knew, a man who looked at her like a business transaction. When he drifted back to sleep, she sat by the window, the city glowing far below. Her mother's photograph stood on the small nightstand, smiling from a world that had felt lighter. Maya whispered to it, Mom, I do not know what I just did, but please, help me make it right. Morning came too soon. She woke before dawn, pulled on her worn sweater, and stared at the simple gold ring now sitting on her finger. It felt cold, foreign, almost mocking. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Driver will pick you up at 8, 0 amperes. Bring essentials. Move. In required per contract. AH. She reread it twice. There was no greeting, no signature beyond those initials. The chill in her stomach deepened. At exactly 8, a black sedan waited by the curb. The driver, polite but distant, opened the door without a word. Maya looked back at her father's sleeping form one last time, whispered a promise to return soon, and stepped into the car. The city slid by as the sedan wound through the downtown streets toward the northern edge where glass towers gave way to quiet mansions. When the iron gates of the Hale estate opened, she felt her breath catch. The driveway curved through manicured gardens leading to a house that looked more like a museum than a home. Adrian Hale was waiting at the entrance, immaculate as ever, one hand in his pocket. His expression gave nothing away. You are punctual, he said simply. I thought that was part of the contract, she replied, clutching her bag. His gaze flicked to her ring. Good. You are learning. Inside, the house was silent except for the faint ticking of an antique clock. Every step echoed against marble floors. The scent of polished wood and faint cologne filled the air. Adrian led her down a corridor and stopped before a tall set of double doors. This will be your room. You may use any of the amenities, but the west wing is off limits. Meals are at 7, noon, and 6. My assistant will handle your schedule for public appearances. Public appearances? She asked quietly. He turned, his eyes meeting hers. We are a married couple, at least on paper. The world will need to believe it. Her heart stuttered. And if I fail to convince them? His tone did not change. Then the deal ends, and your father's debt returns with interest. The words struck like a slap. For a moment, she wanted to shout, to throw the ring at him and run. But she remembered the hospital bills stacked on the kitchen counter, the machines keeping her father alive. She steadied her breath. I understand, she said softly. Adrian nodded once. Good. Dinner is at 7. When he walked away, the echo of his footsteps faded down the hall, leaving her alone in the cavernous silence. Maya turned the handle and stepped into the room that was now hers. It was elegant, too large, too quiet. On the dresser stood a bouquet of white lilies, fresh, perfect, and scentless. A note lay beside it, written in precise handwriting. Rule number 1. No love, no emotion, no attachment. Maya read it twice, her throat tightening. She folded the note, placed it in the drawer, and whispered to herself, Then I will follow every rule he makes, until I find the one he cannot keep. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the clouds lingered thick, gray, and waiting. The first morning inside the Hale estate felt like walking through a museum that no one was allowed to touch. Sunlight filtered weakly through tall windows, falling across marble floors polished to a mirror shine. Maya stood in the center of her new bedroom, unsure if she was supposed to feel grateful or imprisoned. Every corner of the room whispered wealth, but none of it felt alive. She showered quickly, changed into a plain blouse, and followed the faint smell of coffee toward the dining room. The long table could have seated 20 people, yet only 2 chairs were set, one at each end. Adrian Hale was already there, reading through a folder, his expression unreadable. Good morning, she said carefully. He did not look up. Sit. She hesitated, then took the distant seat opposite him. Between them sat a porcelain pot of coffee and a plate of untouched croissants. The silence was almost physical. About the contract, he began, flipping a page without lifting his gaze. There are 5 rules you are expected to follow. You already know the first one. Maya kept her hands folded tightly in her lap. No love, no emotion, no attachment. He nodded once. The second rule: do not interfere in my business affairs. You are here to play a role, nothing more. The third: you will attend social functions with me when requested. Appear calm, confident, and content. People will believe what they see, not what they hear. She nodded slowly. The fourth: you are to remain discreet. No interviews, no photos, no stories. The world already gossips enough. And the fifth? She asked quietly. Adrian closed the folder, finally lifting his eyes to hers. When the 6 months end, you will walk away. No demands, no negotiations, clean exit. Maya stared at him, trying to steady her breath. You have thought of everything. I do not make mistakes, he replied simply. She wanted to ask why this arrangement mattered so much to a man who already seemed to have everything. But his posture made it clear that curiosity was not part of the deal. The rest of breakfast passed in silence. When she finally stood to leave, Adrian's voice followed her, low but firm. Dinner is formal tonight. My assistant will help you prepare. By noon, a woman in her 30s appeared at her door. I am Claire. Mr. Hale asked me to arrange your wardrobe, she said briskly, stepping inside with a garment bag. Maya tried to thank her, but the assistant's eyes flicked toward her ring, assessing her in quiet judgment. Hours later, Maya stood in front of the mirror wearing an evening gown the color of midnight. The fabric shimmered under the soft light, elegant but heavy, like armor. She barely recognized the reflection staring back. When the clock struck 7, Adrian was waiting at the base of the staircase. His suit was perfectly cut, his tie precise. For the first time, his gaze lingered a moment longer than formality required. You clean up well, he said. Maya managed a faint smile. So do you. In. He offered his arm, a gesture that felt rehearsed yet strangely intimate. Shall we? The event was a charity dinner for the Hale Foundation, held at one of the city's grand hotels. Photographers flashed their cameras as soon as they entered the ballroom. Maya's pulse quickened, but Adrian leaned in slightly, his voice a calm anchor. Smile, Mrs. Hale. They love a happy couple. She obeyed, forcing her lips into a practiced curve. Together, they moved through the crowd, handshakes, introductions, polite laughter. It was a performance, every gesture choreographed. Yet as she watched him interact, Maya noticed something no headline had ever shown. Beneath the cold precision, there was a man quietly watching the room like someone who had learned long ago never to trust it. During dinner, one of the board members leaned toward her with a glass of champagne and a smirk. So, Mrs. Hale, tell us, how does it feel to marry into power? The words sliced through the air. Maya froze for a second, hearing a few stifled chuckles around the table. Adrian's jaw tightened. Before he could respond, Maya spoke softly but clearly. Power, she said, meeting the man's eyes, is not something you marry into. It is something you learn to live without losing yourself. The laughter died instantly. The board member blinked, embarrassed, then looked away. Adrian's expression softened almost imperceptibly. When the dinner ended, the car ride back to the estate was quiet. Rain tapped gently against the window again, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Halfway home, Adrian finally spoke. You handled yourself well tonight. She turned her head, surprised by the trace of warmth in his tone. I was just being honest. Most people in that room forgot how to be, he replied, his gaze fixed on the dark skyline. Back at the mansion, he opened the car door for her, a simple gesture that felt unexpectedly human. For a moment, their eyes met in the rain-lit silence, neither cold nor kind, but searching. Then he stepped back. Good night, Mrs. Hale. She hesitated, then nodded. Good night, Mr. Hale. As she climbed the stairs to her room, she could still feel the echo of his voice, low and steady, following her through the empty halls. The rules of the contract were clear, but something in the way he had said her name made her wonder, was he already breaking his own? The following weeks settled into a rhythm that did not feel like a marriage, but not entirely like captivity either. Each morning, Maya would wake to the quiet hum of the estate, the smell of freshly brewed coffee drifting from the kitchen, and the sound of Adrian's voice echoing faintly from his home office. They rarely spoke beyond what was necessary. She learned his schedule by instinct, the measured pace of his footsteps before a conference call, the way he loosened his tie precisely at 7 each evening, and the silence that followed him like a shadow. But small things began to change. One afternoon, while arranging flowers in the sitting room, Maya noticed him standing by the window, staring at the rain. His reflection in the glass looked distant, almost haunted. She hesitated, then said quietly, "You look like someone who is remembering something painful." Adrian turned, caught off guard. "I do not remember things," he said flatly, but the pause in his tone betrayed him. She offered a small smile. "Everyone remembers something, even the people who claim they do not." He looked at her for a long moment before returning to his papers, but that night, when she passed by his office, she heard the faint sound of a piano, soft, hesitant notes drifting through the dark. At dinner the next evening, he surprised her. "Do you play?" he asked suddenly, his fork resting midair. "Only a little," she admitted. "My mother taught me before she passed away." He nodded thoughtfully. "You should play again. The instrument in the lounge is not just decoration." Hell, she blinked, unsure if it was an order or an invitation. That night, she sat at the grand piano, fingers trembling over the keys. When she played, the sound filled the cold halls with warmth. From the hallway, unseen, Adrian watched his expression unreadable, but his hand tightening slightly around the glass he held. The days grew longer, the silence between them softer. What had begun as a contract started to feel like a fragile truce between two wounded people pretending not to need each other. Then came the gala. It was one of those glittering charity events where every smile was rehearsed and every donation was a competition. Maya had learned to play her part, but that night something felt off. Adrian's ex-fiancée, a woman named Victoria Lane, was among the guests. She approached with a smile that looked sharp enough to cut glass. "Maya, is it?" she said sweetly, eyes flicking to the diamond ring on Maya's hand. "I must say, Adrian moves quickly. The ink on our breakup papers was barely dry before he found his next project." Maya froze, the insult landing hard. Before she could respond, Adrian stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. "Victoria, that is enough." Victoria's laugh was light, cruel. "Oh, come on, Adrian. We both know this marriage is not real. Everyone in this room can see it." Maya felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her voice steady. "Maybe it started that way. But tell me, what part of you still being here is real?" For a heartbeat, the air went still. Even Victoria's smirk faltered. Then Adrian placed a protective hand on Maya's back. "We are done here." As they walked away, whispers followed them like smoke. Inside the car, the silence was thick until Adrian finally spoke. "You handled that better than I did." Maya let out a shaky breath. "It is not hard to stay calm when people already think the worst of you." His voice softened, barely above a whisper. "You do not deserve that." The sincerity in his tone startled her. For the first time, she saw past the polished surface, the exhaustion behind his eyes, the loneliness he wore like armor. When they returned to the estate, the storm outside had grown fierce. Lightning flashed across the sky as Maya stepped into the foyer. Adrian followed, loosening his tie. "You should rest," he said quietly. But before she could reply, the power flickered and went out, plunging the house into darkness. Maya gasped softly. Adrian reached for a candle from the table, lighting it with a match. The small flame cast golden light across his face, softer, almost human. He looked at her then, really looked at her. "You are not afraid of much, are you?" Maya met his gaze. "I've already lost too much to fear what is left." Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the composure he guarded so carefully. For a moment, neither of them moved. The candlelight flickered between them, the distance shrinking until his voice dropped lower. "Go to bed, Maya," he said gently, turning away before the silence betrayed more than he intended. She climbed the stairs, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. In her room, she pressed a hand to her chest, trying to calm the strange ache that had begun to grow there. Downstairs, Adrian blew out the candle, staring into the darkness long after the flame had died. He told himself it was nothing, that the rule still stood. But deep down, he knew the truth was no longer simple. Because somewhere between rules and reality, something real had already begun. By the time winter settled over Chicago, the marriage that began as a contract had turned into something that no document could define. Maya no longer walked the halls like a guest. She moved through the house as if she belonged there. Adrian still kept his distance, yet his silence had changed. It was no longer cold, it was watchful. Then one morning, A letter arrived on heavy stationery embossed with the Hale Corporation seal. Adrian handed it to her at breakfast. "The annual board gala," he said, his tone even. "You will attend with me." Maya read the invitation. Formal dinner, press attendance, charity presentation. Sounds exhausting. "It is," Adrian replied. "And this year, more than ever, appearances matter." She caught the faint tension in his voice. "Is something wrong?" He hesitated before answering. "The board is questioning my leadership. They think our marriage is a distraction. You will help prove them wrong." The words landed heavier than she expected. She nodded slowly. "Then let us make sure they see what they need to." For days, the house buzzed with quiet preparation. Tailors visited, stylists arranged fittings, and Adrian's staff rehearsed seating charts like it was a military operation. Through it all, Maya kept her calm. She had learned to smile when she was nervous and to breathe when the room felt too big. On the evening of the gala, Adrian waited by the car in a black tuxedo, his cufflinks catching the light like ice. When he saw her step out in a silver gown, something in his expression softened before he quickly masked it. "You look appropriate," he said, a flicker of warmth beneath his measured tone. Maya smiled faintly. "Do not overdo the compliments, Mr. Hale. Someone might think you are breaking your own rule." He glanced at her, lips curving. "Let us not start rumors before we arrive." The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and conversation. Cameras flashed as they entered, hands intertwined for the world to see. Adrian's grip was steady, guiding her through the sea of executives and socialites who whispered behind manicured smiles. "Mrs. Hale," one woman greeted, her tone dripping with sugar. "You must be very proud. Your husband's company has survived another quarter without scandal." Maya's reply was smooth. "That is the thing about survival. It is never as glamorous as success, but it matters more." A few people nearby laughed politely, surprised by her composure. Adrian's eyes met hers, a brief glint of admiration passing between them. As the evening wore on, the board chairman took the stage. "Tonight," he announced, "we honor the Hale Foundation for its contribution to education programs nationwide." Applause filled the room. Adrian stepped up to the microphone, his voice calm, practiced. "This foundation exists because my father believed wealth means nothing without purpose. My wife, Maya, reminded me of that." Maya blinked, startled. It was the first time he had spoken her name publicly, the first time he had given her more than a role. Cameras turned toward her, capturing her expression, soft surprise, quiet grace. After the speech, they mingled among the guests. It almost felt easy, until a familiar voice sliced through the noise. "Well," Victoria Lane said, her glass of champagne tilting in amusement, "you do play the part beautifully. Tell me, Maya, does it ever get exhausting pretending to love him?" Maya froze. The crowd around them went silent. Adrian's hand tightened at his side. She turned slowly, her voice steady but cold. "Pretending is easy, Miss Lane. It is honesty that most people cannot manage." A low murmur rippled through the onlookers. Victoria's smile faltered, but she leaned closer, whispering, "We both know this is a deal. When it ends, he will forget you like everyone else." Maya's pulse pounded in her ears. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, Adrian stepped forward. His tone was calm but edged with steel. "That is enough, Victoria. You should leave before you embarrass yourself further." The woman's expression crumbled, and she turned away, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. When the tension finally broke, Adrian looked at Maya. "Are you all right?" She drew a shaky breath. "I am fine. You did not have to defend me." "Yes," he said quietly. "I did." The car ride home was silent, the kind of silence that hums with things unspoken. Outside, snow had begun to fall, blanketing the city in soft white. At the estate, Adrian walked her to the door. "You were remarkable tonight," he said finally. "I meant what I said at the podium." Maya turned to him. "Which part?" "That you reminded me what purpose looks like." She met his gaze, the air between them charged with something fragile but undeniable. "Then maybe you are not as untouchable as you pretend to be." For a heartbeat, he said nothing. Then he smiled faintly, his first genuine smile since the day they met. "Careful, Mrs. Hale. That sounds dangerously close to emotion." "Then maybe the rules are changing," she whispered. He held her eyes for a long moment before stepping back. "Good night, Maya." When she finally entered her room, She stood by the window, watching the snow fall against the dark glass. Somewhere down the hall, she heard the faint sound of a piano hesitant notes, familiar and unfinished. Maya smiled softly. She knew now that the contract might still exist on paper, but in the quiet spaces between their words, something real was taking root, something neither of them had planned for, and neither of them could ignore. The morning after the gala, the mansion was quiet except for the ticking of the clock in the hallway. The snow outside had softened the world to a hush, but inside, Maya felt everything louder than ever, the echo of Adrian's voice at the podium, the way he had said her name, the way his eyes had softened when no one else was watching. She found him in the library, standing by the window, a cup of black coffee in hand. Sunlight glinted off the glass shelves behind him, but his face was pale, unreadable. "You should still be asleep," he said without turning. "I could say the same to you." He gave a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. "I do not sleep much." Maya hesitated at the doorway. "Because of work? Because of memory?" He looked at her then, and something unguarded flickered across his expression, fatigue, regret, maybe both. She stepped closer. "You never talk about your past. There is not much worth talking about." "Maybe not to you," she said softly, "but maybe it explains why you need rules to keep people away." He met her eyes, and for once, he did not deny it. "People leave, or they change. Either way, it hurts less when you stop expecting them to stay." Maya's voice trembled. "And yet, you married me a stranger so your company would trust you again. You made a contract to prove you could still belong somewhere. You already broke your own rule when you asked me to sign it." The words hung between them. He set down his cup slowly, as if the air had grown heavier. "You think I wanted this?" "I think you wanted control," she answered, her tone gentle. "And you cannot control the heart, no matter how many contracts you write." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, almost in a whisper, "You talk like love is a solution." She smiled sadly. "No, love does not solve everything, but it makes things worth trying for." Something cracked in his composure then, not visibly, but enough that the silence that followed was different, less guarded. Later that afternoon, Maya went to visit her father at the hospital. The winter light poured through the tall windows, reflecting off the machines beside his bed. He looked weaker but smiled when he saw her. "You look happy," he murmured. "Marriage suits you." She laughed softly, brushing his hair back. "You are the first person to say that." "You always tried to fix broken things," he said gently. "Maybe that is why you are there to fix him." His words struck her deeper than she expected. That evening, she returned to the estate and found Adrian still in his study. The room was dark except for the glow of his laptop. She set a small takeout box on his desk. "What is this?" he asked, surprised. "Dinner. You skipped it again." He glanced at her, a hint of amusement breaking through. "You are feeding me now?" "Someone has to." He studied her for a moment, then closed the laptop. "You should not care this much. It complicates things." "Too late," she said quietly. "It already is complicated." He leaned back, watching her. "You are not afraid of me." "Should I be?" "Most people are." Maya shook her head. "That is because most people see your power. I see your loneliness." His breath caught almost imperceptibly. For a long time, neither of them moved. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Then he stood, walking toward the window, his voice low. "When I was 24, my mother died," he said. "My father cared more about the company than the funeral. He told me emotions were liabilities. That was the last real conversation we ever had." Maya's heart clenched. "I am sorry." He turned, his expression softer than she had ever seen. "You should not be. But you should know why I built walls. They were never meant to keep people out. They were meant to keep me from feeling everything I lost." She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "You cannot live behind those walls forever." For a heartbeat, he looked at her like a man standing at the edge of something terrifying and beautiful. Then he said quietly, "You make it sound easy." "It is not easy," she whispered, "but it is human." He looked down, then back at her. "You make me want to remember what that means." Her breath caught. The words were simple, but they shattered something between them, an invisible barrier neither had dared to cross. When she left the study that night, her pulse was still racing. She knew she should keep her distance, that the rule still existed, that the contract still had an end date, but somewhere deep inside, she also knew that the line between real and pretend had already vanished. In his office, Adrian stood alone, staring at the empty doorway where she had just been. The snow outside fell heavier, blanketing the world in white silence. He pressed a hand against his chest, as if testing whether his heart was still under his control. It was not, and for the first time in years, he did not want it to be. The following week began like any other, but something in the air had shifted. The warmth that had quietly grown between them now lived in every glance, every pause. Yet neither of them dared to speak it aloud. Then, on a cold Thursday morning, the illusion shattered. Maya was in the library, organizing paperwork for one of Adrian's upcoming charity projects, when the sound of footsteps broke the quiet. She looked up to see Victoria Lane standing in the doorway, a smirk curving her painted lips. "Well," Victoria said, her voice smooth and cruel, "the housewife is hard at work. How touching." Maya stiffened. "What are you doing here?" "I came to drop off something your husband forgot." She waved a folded document between two fingers, her eyes glinting. "But then I realized you probably have no idea what it is." Before Maya could reply, Victoria tossed the papers onto the table. They slid open just enough for Maya to see the heading marriage contract agreement and her own signature beneath it. Her stomach dropped. Victoria smiled wider. "Do not look so surprised, dear. The board already has a copy. Someone leaked it. By morning, every media outlet in the city will know that the perfect Mrs. Hale is nothing more than a hired wife." Maya's voice came out thin. "You would ruin him just to hurt me?" Victoria laughed softly. "Oh, sweetheart, men like Adrian ruin themselves. I just give the world a little push." The door opened again. Adrian's voice filled the room, sharp and commanding. "Victoria." She turned lazily, feigning innocence. "Adrian, how lovely to see you." "Get out," he said coldly. She tilted her head. "You really should not be angry with me. You are the one who wrote the contract." She glanced at Maya, her smile poisonous. "Tell me, does it sting to realize you were just another transaction?" Adrian took a step closer, his voice low. "If you say one more word, you will regret it." Victoria's expression faltered, but she lifted her chin. "You cannot silence the truth forever." With that, she swept out of the room, leaving the door swinging behind her. The silence that followed was unbearable. Maya stared at the papers on the table, her hands trembling. "Is it true? Did the board see this?" Adrian exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "They will by morning. Someone sent it to the press." Her voice broke. "Then it was all for nothing. Everything we built." He interrupted, stepping closer. "No, it was never nothing." "But it started that way," she whispered. "You made me a deal, and I accepted it. And now it is going to destroy you." He looked at her, his eyes dark with guilt. "I can fix this." "How?" she asked, tears forming. "By denying me? By saying the contract was fake? Because if you do that, you will prove every word she said." Adrian reached out, but she stepped back. "Do not," she said softly. "Please, do not make it harder." For the first time, she saw fear in his expression, not for himself, but for her. "Maya, listen to me. I will not let this ruin you." She shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. "It already has." Without another word, she turned and walked past him, her footsteps echoing through the marble hall like a clock counting down. Adrian stood alone in the silence, staring at the papers that had once seemed like protection. Now they were chains. The rule that was meant to keep his heart safe had finally broken everything he cared about. Outside, the snow kept falling quiet, relentless, and indifferent to the ruin it covered. The next 24 hours unfolded like a storm. By morning, the news had spread across every business channel and gossip site in the city. Headlines screamed, "Hale marriage exposed contract scandal rocks CEO's empire." Photographers crowded outside the Hale Tower, and the board of directors demanded an emergency meeting. Inside the mansion, Maya sat on the edge of her bed, her phone buzzing non-stop. Every call, every message felt like a knife. She could barely breathe as she read the articles, her name plastered under words like fraud, gold digger, and pawn. When Adrian entered the room, she did not look up. "You should not be here," she said quietly. "They will think you are protecting me." "I am," he replied. Her eyes filled with tears. "Adrian, stop. The company is falling apart because of me, because of that contract." He took a step forward. "No, because of me. I wrote the rule. I built the wall. I made you live inside a lie." She shook her head, voice trembling. "You cannot fix this. Not this time." But he only said, "Watch me." 2 hours later, Hale Tower was packed with reporters. Cameras flashed as Adrian walked to the podium in a black suit. No tie, no script, just the same calm voice the world had always trusted, now laced with something raw. "Many of you have read the headlines," he began. "Yes, a contract existed. I wrote it. I asked a woman to marry me under the terms of a deal that should have never existed." A murmur rippled through the crowd. He continued, "I did it to protect my company's image, to control what I could not feel. But along the way, I discovered something I never planned for truth. Maya Thompson did not ruin my reputation. She saved me from becoming a man who cared more about perception than people." He paused, eyes steady on the flashing cameras. "She owes me nothing, but I owe her everything. So if you want to blame someone, blame me." The room fell silent. A single question came from a reporter near the front. "Are you saying you love her?" Adrian's answer was immediate. "Yes. Against every rule I ever made, yes." Across the city, Maya watched the broadcast from her father's hospital room. Her hands covered her mouth as the screen filled with his face, honest, unguarded, and completely hers. When the conference ended, reporters shouted questions, but Adrian simply walked away, ignoring the chaos. He drove straight to the hospital, arriving breathless, still in front of flashing cameras that trailed behind him. Maya stood at the entrance, disbelief in her eyes. "Why would you do that?" "Because it was the only way to tell the truth," he said, "and because I am done hiding behind contracts." She looked at him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "They will tear you apart." Maybe," he said softly. "But at least I will be free, and so will you." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded marriage contract, the same pages that had bound them together. He tore them in half, the sound echoing through the quiet hallway. "No more rules," he said. "No more pretending." Maya's breath caught. "Adrian." He stepped closer, his voice barely a whisper. "I love you. Not because of what you did, not because of what you gave up, but because you saw me when I could not see myself." Her tears broke into a shaky laugh. "You really do not make anything simple, do you?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe love is not meant to be simple." Outside, cameras still flashed. But for the first time, Adrian did not care. He took Maya's hand and kissed her forehead gently. "I told the world the truth," he murmured. "Now let us build something real." And in that moment, amid the noise, the headlines, and the storm, they finally stepped out of the shadow of the contract and into the light of something genuine. 6 months later, spring returned to Chicago. The ice had melted, the trees were alive again, and for the first time in a long while, the Hale name was no longer whispered in scandal but spoken with respect. Adrian had stepped down from the board temporarily to rebuild the company's reputation and had turned most of his energy toward the Hale Foundation. The press that once hounded them now called it a rebirth. Maya stood in the middle of the new gallery space downtown, surrounded by canvases painted by young artists sponsored through the foundation. The event banner read, "True Terms, the Art of New Beginnings." It was Adrian's idea, but the dedication was hers. When he arrived, the room quieted slightly. He looked different now, less guarded, more human. The years of discipline still showed in his sharp suit, but his eyes carried warmth instead of distance. "You still make an entrance," Maya teased gently. He smiled. "Old habits die hard." As guests moved about, she led him to the far end of the gallery where a single glass case stood beneath soft lighting. Inside were 2 items. A gold wedding ring and a torn piece of paper, the remains of their marriage contract. Adrian looked at it for a long time. "I almost burned it," he said quietly, "but maybe some mistakes deserve to be remembered." Maya smiled. "It was not a mistake. It was how we found each other." The crowd drifted away as he turned to her. "You know," he said, "we never had a real wedding." Her brow lifted slightly. "And whose fault was that?" He reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. The diamond was simple, elegant, nothing like the one she had worn before. "I thought we could try again," he said, "this time without rules." Her eyes filled with tears as the crowd noticed what was happening. Whispers rose, phones lifted, but Adrian's voice stayed low, meant only for her. "Maya Thompson," he said, "you once signed your name on paper because of duty. I am asking you now to sign your heart out of choice. Will you marry me for real this time? She covered her mouth, laughing through her tears. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, Adrian Hale. Applause erupted, but they barely heard it. He slid the ring onto her finger, the same hand that once trembled over a contract now steady and sure. Later, as the celebration continued, Adrian pulled her close and whispered, "Do you remember the rule?" She smiled against his shoulder. No love, no emotion, no attachment. He laughed softly. The only rule I am happy to break. Outside, the city glowed under the evening lights. For once there were no lies, no contracts, no walls, just two people who had finally learned that love, like any true deal, only lasts when it is built on honesty. And as they stood there, husband and wife by choice, their story came full circle, from signatures on paper to promises made by heart. Thank you so much for watching until the end of this story. If it touched your heart or made you believe in love again, please take a moment to subscribe. It is quick, free, and it helps us keep creating meaningful stories like this one. Your support truly keeps this channel alive and growing. Before you go, tell us where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below so we know where our stories are reaching hearts around the world. Once again, thank you for being part of this journey. Stay kind, stay hopeful, and we will see you in the next story.